योगेन
चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानततोऽस्मि आबाहुपुरुषाकारं शङ्खचक्रासिधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिं गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। हरि ओम।
Is this working, the mic? Okay. So we are at Sutra 2.5, and last time we saw about 2/3 of Vyasa's Bhashya on this sutra. So today we'll continue from where we left off last time. Just as a reminder, the sutra is Anitya Shuchi Dukkhanatmasu Nitya Shuchi Sukhatmakyatir Avidya. So essentially, avidya is being defined here, where it says anitya being considered as nitya. Okay, so impermanent as permanent, ashuchi as shuchi, so impure as pure, dukkha as sukha, so sorrow as pleasure, anatma as atma, so something that is non-self being considered self. Right? Exactly, this is avidya. Okay, so that is sort of the genius of this definition, in the sense that it is a very precise definition. It's a chatushpada avidya, it says. So there are exactly these four things, these four misconceptions that almost underlie all living beings. Okay, but exactly these four things is avidya. So that is how Patanjali has made a very precise definition here, as opposed to a very abstract saying avidya is maya, it is an indescribable shakti that puts everyone into illusion, right? So that's a very different type of definition. Here the choice is made in the style of all the sutras that we have seen to be very precise, to enumerate in a certain very finite manner these four things, these five things, right? And not leave anything open-ended. The other thing being done here is avidya, the pratyaya aspect of avidya. Okay, so the pratyaya means the imprint on the chitta, the imprint on the mental instrument. So the pratyaya aspect of avidya is of the nature of the viparyaya vritti. Okay, so the viparyaya vritti was defined as mithya jnanam atadrupa pratishtam. Right, it is a wrong or contrary understanding was viparyaya. But viparyaya is a general wrong understanding. The pratyaya aspect of avidya is a specific wrong understanding. Okay? The specificness is given by these four things, right? Anitya, nitya, and so on. The other aspect of avidya, so this is the pratyaya aspect of avidya. The other aspect of avidya is of the nature of klesha moola. Okay? Now, klesha is, as we saw, it is of the nature of mala. Mala means dirt or impurity. So it brings the dirt or impurity. If you go in the sort of description in terms of gunas, it is a raja, tama, mala. Okay, it is the nature of impurities is what klesha is. Right? So avidya is also the viparyaya vritti, but is also the klesha moola because it brings the raja, tama, mala. And therefore, when describing vrittis, pramana was enumerated as pratyaksha, anumana, agama, pramanani. But when describing viparyaya, it was not enumerated as avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. So that was left for the second chapter, right? Because even though the pratyaya is of the aspect of vritti, the swarupa is of the aspect of klesha, which is mala. Okay, so the nature of avidya is of the aspect of mala, and the kleshas are not predominant for a uttamadhikari yogi who is covered in the first chapter. Therefore, it is coming in the second chapter, because for the uttamadhikari, the klesha is already tanu. It is already attenuated. So it is not so important for the uttamadhikari yogi, whereas for the second chapter, for the madhyamadhikari, it is key. It is sort of the main thing. And therefore, as we saw, avidya of the nature of the mala, and therefore of the nature of the mula of all the kleshas is being described. And here we are at the definition. Now we'll continue from where we left off. We had seen the anitya nitya, ashuchi shuchi, and the dukkha sukha confusion. Okay, now we'll start with the anatma atma. That misconception is being described by Vyasa, and then we'll see what he says. Okay. So Vyasa says, Tatha anatmani atmakhyatihi bahyopakaraneshu chetana chetaneshu. Okay, so he says similarly, because he has described already the nitya, anitya, dukkha, sukha, and shuchi, ashuchi. So similarly, anatmani, in things that are not self. Okay, atmakhyatihi, seeing or knowing or understanding it as self, as atma. Self means can either be me or mine. Both of them are covered. Atmakhyatihi bahyopakaraneshu chetana chetaneshu, among things that are outside, whether chetana means sentient or insentient or non-sentient. Okay, so the examples typically given are, for the chetana, putradara pashvadi means son, spouse, and possessions like cattle and so on. So these are bahyopakaranam, because we know that it is not part of our embodiment, but it is still considered as me and mine. Okay, so these are the chetana, sentient. Achetana shayyasanashanadi. So the house, the bed, the food, and everything being considered as mine. So bahyopakaraneshu chetana chetaneshu. So that is one realm where the confusion between anatma atma happens. The other realm is bhogadishthane va sharire. Okay, within the body itself. What is the nature of the body being mentioned here? Bhogadishthane. It is the substrate of all experience, of all the bhoga. Okay, so all the experience that is happening, it is happening through the medium of the body, and body is the substrate of that. So shariram bhogadishthanam. In that, there is an anatma atma confusion, because it is considered as me and mine. The body is considered as me and mine, which is also false, essentially, right? It is not only sort of off the mark, it is completely false, contrary. Okay. Even further, purushopakarane va manasi. Okay, so the manas, the mind, what is it? It is a purushopakaranam. Purushopakaranam meaning it is an instrument for the Purusha, instrument of the Purusha, but it is still not me and mine. Okay, so in the mind also, considering the mind as me is, or considering mind as even mine, is contrary to its true nature, because it is essentially a jada instrument in the absence of Purusha. Okay, so in these, whether things outside, whether the body or the mind, anatmani atmakhyatihi iti. So this is just an elaboration. So all of these are of the nature of anatma. However, what is happening is atmakhyati. It is being considered as atma or self. And this is the example of the misconception of the nature of anatma and atma, which constitutes one of the four aspects of avidya. Tathaitad atroktam. So now Vyasa is again quoting from an even older source. Vyaktam avyaktam va sattvam atmatvena abhipratitya. Okay, so whether vyaktam or avyaktam, whether manifest or unmanifest. Sattvam. Sattvam means any substance, any vastu, any object. Atmatvena abhipratitya, considering that as mine. Tasya sampadam anunandati. Okay, so when that prospers, the person feels happy. Okay, because it is being considered as me and mine. When there is prosperity there, the person feels happy. Tasya sampadam anunandati. Atma sampadam manvanaha, because it is being considered prosperity of the self. Okay, so for example, if the family prospers, the person prospers because it's being considered as self, my family, right? So anunandati. Atma sampadam manvanaha, considering it as a prosperity of the self. Tasya vyapadam anushochati. Okay, when the prosperity goes away, when let's say sorrow or tragedy strikes there, the person also follows by feeling sorrowful. Right? Anushochati, feeling sad about it. Tasya vyapadam anushochati atma vyapadam manvanaha, because that is again being considered as a sorrowful state, sort of poverty of the self. Okay? So when something else prospers, the person is being happy. When something else, and the something else includes outside things, body and mind, everything, because all of that is anatma. And it should be seen as something else. So when something else prospers, the person is happy. When something else is sorrowful, the person is sorrowful. Why? Because he is considering it as atma. Atma sampadam, atma vyapadam manvanaha, considering it as self. Sarvo apratibuddha iti. So sarvaha apratibuddha iti, which means he is, it is almost as if the person is asleep because he is not understanding. Just as a person who is completely asleep or unconscious is not understanding things in the right manner. Similarly, he has not yet woken up. He has not yet woken up to true knowledge, and therefore it is apratibuddha. So, sarva apratibuddha iti. Okay, so the whole point here is, now that we have seen these four, he says, Esha chatushpada bhavati avidya. So this avidya is chatushpada. It is a thing, it is like a stool with four stands. It stands on four. So the avidya stands on these four things. Moolamasya klesha santanasya. It is the root of the children in terms of the kleshas. So all the kleshas, because it is a kshetra where they are born, right? So santana it is born, the kleshas are born out of this root of all the kleshas. Klesha santanasya karmashayasya cha. So the entire karmashaya, okay, and the whole karma siddhanta will come in the Yoga Sutra text, and that is also very interesting. This whole karmashaya, the whole repository of karma, that is also a child of this avidya, because the avidya is the moolam, it is the root that is causing all of this. The whole samsara, this whole karma cycle, the root is avidya. So klesha santanasya karmashayasya cha savipakasya iti. So savipaka means what is the nature of the karmashaya? It is savipaka, means something that fructifies. Right? So it is used as an adjective. The karmashaya, the karmashaya that is bound to fructify, and it is going to lead to bhoga or experience, which is again going to lead to karma, which is again going to lead to bhoga, and so on. All of this, the root is avidya, which has these 4 feet on which it stands. Okay, that is what Vyasa is saying. So essentially, the idea is one who knows this, or one who wants to, with this jnana, one who wants to practice, he needs to continuously have that discrimination, saying, oh, is this sorrowful or pleasurable? Is this permanent or impermanent? Is it self or non-self? Is it pure or impure? So the yogi, when he is charged with this jnana, will then recognize things that, okay, sorrowful, no point going after that. Impermanent, no point going after that. Right? Impure, no point going after that. Non-self, no point worrying after that. And with this, the vairagya is going to build. And with that vairagya and abhyasa, the yogi can proceed. So this is how the jnana of avidya is essential for any practitioner to have the right frame of mind in terms of understanding the world, because being part of the world is inevitable. But the right understanding of it sort of builds an insulation for the yogi from being affected by everything in the world. And now, next we will see the nature of the term avidya, but we have seen what it means so far.
This notion, concept, idea of me and mine, this is the place where we have conspicuous kind of ignorance, illusions. It is very strange that we have illusion about our own self, which is going to give validity to knowledge or invalidity to knowledge that we are going to get through perceptions and cognitions. We say, pointing at the rose, we say this is rose. That becomes a valid perception. Why it is valid perception? Because I am seeing the rose and I am knowing this as rose. Now that I itself is illusion. The subjective entity itself, there is a misconception. There is a more than misconception, it's a confusion. Because nobody says I do not know me. Nobody says that I do not know me. Then what it is? It is not illusion, it is more a confusion. So most confounding thing in this world for us is we ourselves. This is quite a strange thing. Then we think now we are awakened. We are awakened for the world around us. That's why we can see all that is around us. We know this is Sunday, this is morning, this is institute, this is model colony, this is Pune. And we are awakened to what is around us. But Vyasa points out that actually we are fast asleep, actually. That's why there's a expression called spiritual awakening. It is not spiritual realization. Spiritual awakening. That means what? We are in deep slumber with regards to ourselves. That is why this state of Jagruta Avastha or awakeful state is called Dirgha Swapna. Dirgha Swapna in mysticism. It's a long, long, long dream. We are in a long dream now. Why? Is it all real? Yes, it's all real. But the one who knows, there is great confusion about that subjective entity. And it's a great kind of awe-inspiring subject. What is most awe-inspiring in this universe is our own subjective entity, to which we turn our backs and go on looking for all wonders in the world, and we ourselves are great wonder. About me and mine, anatmaso atmakhyati is avidya. Seeing the non-self as self is avidya. Now see the confusion in about I said nobody will say I do not know I myself. But actually there is the greatest amount of ignorance, greatest amount of confusion, greatest amount of misconception. So we ourselves are bundle of confusion unto ourselves, bundle of illusions. Because if you say this is me and you describe that me, it can be disproved easily. And about me also. So the me is also included, mine is also included in avidya. Me and mine. See the confusion about mine. Regarding our mind, we say this is my mind. Regarding the intelligence, we say this is my intelligence. Regarding the body, we say this is my body. Regarding our own house, we say this is my house. Regarding the spouse, we say my spouse. So certain things are integrally ours and we say mine. Certain things are not integrally ours, yet we say mine. My house, my vehicle, my clothes. So we are using a very faulty language. House is mine because it is mine. My mind is mine because it is mine. My body is mine, therefore it is it is, therefore it is mine. But suppose somebody pricks your body, somebody pricks you. You say, why are you pricking me? Somebody hits you. You say, why are you hitting me? Somebody dents your house. You don't say, why are you denting me? Somebody breaks your house. You don't say, why are you breaking me? Is that right? But when we address them, they say, this is my house. This is my body. When it is my body, see the mindness, somebody pricking, we say, why are you pricking me? Somebody pricks your spouse, you don't say, why are you pricking me? Why are you pricking my spouse? Somebody hits your spouse, you say, why are you hitting my spouse? But with regards to our own body, mind, integral aspects of embodiment, we say, why are you hitting me? Why are you pinching me? Why are you vexing me? Etc. In both the cases, we use the mind. My body, my mind, my senses, my organs, my psyche, my consciousness, my house, my clothes, my things. Now, we make a major flaw. Using mind to something integrally ours and mind to something which is not integrally ours. So that's a flaw in language. We have never bothered about it. So there is a great amount of confusion. We are not really sure about what is really me, what is really mine. So we have imposed mindness on certain things, and we are claiming it is mine. My body, my mind, my house, my clothes, my things, my vehicle, my property, my money. So me and mine, there is a basic confusion, misconception, basically because we are in total slumber about ourselves as to be who we are. That's the gravity of avidya. We will not have slightest doubt about who I am, while we have total ignorance actually, or total confusion. We have lack of clarity. Yet we quite vehemently, vociferously say, this is me. So that's the gravity of Maya, the avidya as Maya, that it casts a spell on us. So we are under constant spell of avidya. It is not even dislodged for a moment even. It is such a strong spell. We have been under it from time immemorial, in all our incarnations, this and here before, and also this and hereafter. Therefore, what is said about spiritual realization is spiritual awakening. That means we are not still awake to ourselves. We are awake to the world around. We are awake for the world around. We are awake to the world around. However, we are not awake to ourselves. That is why in the mysticism and in the mystic literature of philosophy, it is said that we are in dirgha swapna, long dream, which is not revoked. Our dream in sleep is revoked. This is not at all revoked. From time immemorial, time without beginning, this has not been revoked, even for a moment. It is such a strong spell. So that is what this basic avidya is, and in its phase or in its aspect of anatmasu atmakhyati, non-self taken as self. So all proceeds from that. The whole endeavor of the life, all dynamics of life are going to proceed on that kind of perversion or misconception, taking the non-self as self. That's the starting point. Nothing starts before it. It is starter of everything. And then find out that therefore in the literature on spirituality, it is said that this is a great delusion that we are in, because the source of it is in anatmasu atmakhyati, non-self as self. This aspect of avidya is the basic aspect of avidya, therefore other things are coming. If I don't exist, I don't bother about what is permanent, what is impermanent. If I don't exist, I don't bother about what is pure, what is impure. If I don't exist, I don't bother about what is pain and what is pleasure. I must exist. Then only all these things come. So anatmasu atmakhyati is the source aspect. It is the core aspects of avidya. Because of that, other things are coming up. Anityasu nityakhyati. So anitya as nitya, ashuchi as shuchis, dukkha as sukha is all emanating from the first basic avidya, which is non-self taken as self. The one which is not me is taken as me. So when I say this is me, when you say about you also this is me, we are pointing out at that which is not really the me. So that's why it is a metapsychological kind of illusion. If it is illusion, it is metapsychological illusion, because psychological illusions will appear, disappear. They will reappear also. Rope snake illusion, once revoked, doesn't mean that you will never get it again in lifetime. It can come back again. So it can reappear. Any illusion can reappear, and it will be invalidated again. It will be revoked. It won't stay. So it comes and goes, and again comes and again goes. Umpteen number of times will come. It's not that once you know this is illusion, it doesn't mean that you will never have it again. That's why it is psychological illusion. And this is metapsychological. Therefore, we are forced into a subject, what is called as metapsychology. And to be students of yoga, we must look into it. We must get into it. We must be familiar about all those precepts in metapsychology. Because this is the illusion which is not revoked. There is nothing like appearance, disappearance, reappearance. If it goes for all times. It will never come back again. And this has been there, irrevocably there, right from time without beginning, anadikala. It's a great, great spell. Much needs to be known about this avidya. So this avidya is something which is not just to be dispelled. We need to know it. Because if you think you know and you try to dispel, there will be so much of avidya still around, it will start inflicting your life and interfering in life. Therefore, avidya is a matter to be known in adhyatma. It's not to be just dispelled. You dispel the darkness by putting on light. We don't bother to know about darkness. Darkness is not a subject that should be known. Darkness is something which should be dispelled. But since avidya has such a strong gravity, it is enormously pervasive. When it is all enormously pervasive, it is very, very subtle. So knowing it is very important. That's why in adhyatma you have pursuit for avidya as well as vidya. Avidya is not something that has to be dispelled. Avidyayam quoted last Sunday. Avidyayam mrutyum tirtva vidyayam amrutam ashnute. Avidya makes you cross the mortality, and vidya gives you mortality. So avidya is also a matter of study. Avidya needs to be studied. So it's a strange thing. Although we know it is an antagonizer, and when it's an antagonizer, we must try to just dislodge it, destroy it. But there is, in the wisdom process, there is pursuit of avidya also. Narada in the Chandogya Upanishad says, comes to Sanat Kumar and says, I know all entire Vidya and Avidya both. And then he describes what is Avidya, the Vedas, etc. The scriptures, etc. is Avidya. Avidya is not nescience as rendered into English. That's the problem when you render into another language. Vidya is a very interesting concept. Avidya. Perhaps he will be coming to that passage also. Avidya, the prefix, also comes for exalted knowledge. It's a very, very, very intriguing concept, avidya. When you have exalted knowledge, that is avidya. Like logical, illogical. What is illogical? Beyond logic. Logical, illogical, illogical. You are aware of these words. Ethical, unethical, transethical, prefix will come for exaltation as well as negative. It's a negative prefix as well as exalted. Because when the spiritual entity within us, we just can't say that avidya like a demon, a darkness is pervading all over. When the spiritual entity is there, so avidya has two connotations. One is exalted wisdom, beyond all knowledge is also avidya. End of knowledge is also realm of avidya. And opposite of knowledge is also avidya. Avidya is a very strange term for that purpose. Because if you say that avidya is antagonizing, when the spiritual entity is within us, when the Paramatma is within us, Ishvara is within us, so any knowledge about Ishvara is also highest, that's highest knowledge. That is also avidya. But here it is referred to as klesha. This we need to take a measure about it. To take measure, we must really know it. It's a knowledge process to understand avidya, and then the knowledge will itself will dispel the klesha aspect, the kleshatmaka aspect. That's why all vrittis are klishta and aklishta. So avidya is a strange word. In order that we should construe the word here in proper perspective, it defines it. What avidya is as a klesha, what avidya is as a klesha mula. And knowledge pursuit, it's a subject matter for knowledge pursuit. It just can't be expelling like a darkness. You can expel the darkness by putting on light. So, we should know anitya, anitya, it's called nitya, nitya vivek. That means both should be known. You just can't say, I want to just go for nitya and abandon all anitya. Nitya, nitya viveka, sukha, dukkha viveka, sat, asat viveka, atman, atma viveka. That means both are to be known, both are subject matters of knowledge. Anatma should also be known. Don't just believe that body is not Atma. Know that body is not Atma. Don't just believe that the mind is not self. Know that mind is not self. Know that buddhi is not self. So avidya is a very, very intriguing, very mysterious concept which we cannot be covering in the first round of our delineation. The more you go deeper into it, avidya is a great matter to inquiry. And then only we will be able to identify. That's why it is called viveka, discrimination. So in other discrimination, we abandon negative aspect, good or bad. Once we know, we abandon bad. But this avidya is so all-pervasive, so subtle, and that's why the avidya has another form where it becomes transcendent knowledge. So that's for spiritual processes, you must know avidya and cross avidya. know Vidya and cross Vidya. We have to go beyond. And when you cross beyond, that is also called Avidya. A for transcendence. Anyway, let me not further push you into a zone of confusion when we are already in a zone of confusion. But anyway, this is a very intriguing term, avidya. That's why he gives a definition, specific definition. Now we must stick to definition. Then only we can proceed. So anitya as nitya, sudha, dukkha as sukha, anatma as atma. This is aspect of avidya which is being described as a klesha. It is coming as a klesha. So now we must focus upon this aspect of avidya, that it is a klesha, it is source klesha.
So let's go over some other texts that have lines that touch upon it on the same subject matter but in a slightly different way. So there is this text called the Kapila Gita in a Bhagavad Puranam, which is very interesting, and it has one chapter, incidentally not here, but there's one chapter on that completely on the Sankhya, which sort of merges Sankhya and Vedanta. So that's something we'll come to later. But here it is talking about how avidya leads to sort of wrong understanding and problems. So it says, Bhutaihi panchabirarabdhe dehe dehi abudo asakrit. So in this body made up of 5 elements, the dehi, the self, goes in, and now it is abudha, means again sleeping, right? Not realizing, it's as though it is asleep. Again and again. Asakrut means again and again the soul is going into this body made up of 5 elements and becoming as though asleep. In what way? It says, Aham mama iti asadgrahaha karoti kumatir matim. Okay, so it keeps saying me, mine, me, mine, me, mine. Okay, asakrit means puna puna. So again and again it is saying me and mine, me and mine. Asadgrahaha means it is obstinate. Right? It is unwilling to listen, unwilling to understand. So obstinately, the soul, once tied to this body made up of 5 elements, keeps saying me and mine, me and mine, me and mine. Aham mama iti asadgraha karoti kumatir matim. So at this point, the mati, as in the mind, the idea and the plan, right, is a kumati. It is a sort of the completely wrong way of doing things. Right? So this thing, having gotten into the body, because it keeps on saying me and mine, it is making all kind of wrong thoughts and plans. Tadartham kurute karma yadbaddho yati samsrutim. Now that that thing has come into the mind, it starts acting accordingly. Right? Tadartham, for that, kurute karma, it starts doing action and karma. Yadbaddho, which leads to bondage. Yati samsrutim, and goes into this samsara, this worldly realm, again and again. Yo anuyati dadat klesham. Having followed and having done all these things, what it gets is these kleshas of avidya. Yo anuyati dadat klesham avidya karma bandhanaha. So this klesham is avidya, of the nature of bondage due to the karma. So there is a completely different text, again dealing very in the same way with avidya, but relating sort of visually, pictorially, in how a person with this wrong understanding is getting trapped into that again and again, sort of unable to escape from this net of avidya and karma and so on. Now, from the same text from some elsewhere, tasya etasya jano nunam nayam vedoru vikramam. Now, of this whole thing, this avidya and everything, the person definitely does not know the power. Kalyamanopi balino vayo riva ganavalihi. So it is as though the clouds don't understand the power of the wind that is making them move hither and thither and breaking them apart and making them form. So the wind is sort of so powerful and so chaotic and controlling the whole life of the clouds, but the clouds don't realize that, and they are being tossed here and there. Similarly, the person without understanding the power of the avidya and the kala. Okay, because in this text, kala is said to be the bahihi lakshanam of the Paramatma. So the Lord as an antaryami is dwelling inside and controlling. But the Lord as an external entity at the universal scale manifests of the nature of time as kala and all the consequences. And the jana, the person, is not realizing the power of that and being tossed hither and thither. Yam yam artham upadatte dukkhena sukhahetave. Whatever things he is collecting, right, riches, prosperity and so on, yam yam artham upadatte, he is earning and collecting, dukkhena, undergoing a lot of effort and sorrow and trouble to collect those things. Dukkhena sukhahetave. Why? Because he thinks, okay, it will give me pleasure in the future. I need it. So therefore he is going and with a lot of trouble collecting all those things. Tam tam dhunoti bhagavan puman shochati yat krute. All those things that he is earning and collecting, the Lord comes and destroys it, due to which the person then becomes sorrowful. Okay? Tam tam dhunoti bhagavan puman shochati yat krute. So essentially, this is the confusion of sukha dukkha and a permanent impermanent, nitya nitya, which makes the person undergo so much karma and action, which eventually is going to be destroyed anyway because of the power of the kala, the time, that he doesn't realize. Yat adhruvasya dehasya sanubandhasya durmatihi. So this person with the durmati, complete wrong understanding and wrong plans. Adhruvasya dehasya, this body which is completely impermanent and full of bondage. Sanubandhasya durmatihi. Dhruvani manyate mohat. Out of moha or avidya or illusion, he considers it permanent and pleasurable. Grahakshetra vasunicha. And this includes not only the body, but also all the possessions and land and everything else. Now I'll skip through a few slokas. So essentially what is being said here is, through this wrong understanding, this whole world is actually operating, right? And all the effort, the sorrow, the fructification and everything happens because of the wrong understanding. And then it says, Narakasthopi deham vai na pumans tyaktumichhati. So even a being who is in hell, Naraka means hell, okay, who is undergoing experience in hell, even such a being does not want to give up its body. It wants to continue to go on living. Narakasthopi deham vai na pumans tyaktumichhati. Narakyam nivruttau satyam. He considers that living in hell itself as a pleasurable experience, as a liberating experience. Deva Maya vimohitaha. Because he is ensnared by this Deva Maya. And therefore he has, and vimohitaha, completely deluded with wrong understanding. He is being obstinate about something that is not real. Okay? And therefore undergoes all these experiences. Okay? So that is what is being said there. The reason I gave that is to give a flavor of the practical application of avidya and his understanding and the problem it causes and how vidya can sort of liberate one from that. Now we go back to the Vyasa Bhashya and we deal with where Vyasa deals with the term avidya. Okay. So he says, Tasyascha, tasyaha means of avidya. Tasyascha amitragoshpada vastu satatvam vigneyam. He says, just like Amitra and Agoshpada. These are other words in Sanskrit. He says, just like Amitra and Agoshpada are understood as something that have a positive existence. Okay? See, negative existence means something defined by negation. Right? So this is not there. That has no positive existence. It is just a negation being mentioned. But Amitra and Agoshpada, these are words we'll explain, those have a positive existence. Okay, Mitra means friend. Amitra does not mean not friend. Amitra is usually mentioned as enemy. Okay, so Amitra is somebody who is an enemy, which has a positive existence. Positive not in the sense of being good. Positive in the terms of having a real reality, a real existence. Okay, so Amitra means enemy and it has a positive existence. Amitra, if interpreted as not Mitra or not friend, it does not have a positive existence. Okay? So, yatha namitro mitra bhavaha. न मित्रमात्रम किंतु तद विरुद्धः sapatnah. So sapatna means shatru or enemy. Okay. So just like amitra is not mitra bhavaha. It is not abhava means non-existence. So amitra does not means not friend or non-existence of friendliness, but it means sapatna means it means enemy. It also does not mean mitra matram. Okay. Mitra matram alludes to what he referred to. So one could also, amitra could also mean nothing but mitra. Okay, it is complete friendliness and nothing else. Can also be one meaning of amitra, which is a valid interpretation as per the rules of the language as laid out by Panini and so on. But amitra is usually taken to be sapatna or shatru or enemy, okay, which has a real existence of its own. The enemy has a real existence. Tata cha agoshpadam na goshpada bhavo na goshpada matram. So goshpada is a sort of what it means is a cow's foot. Okay, the sort of the cow's foot. Agoshpada does not mean the absence of the cow's foot. Okay, actually agoshpada means land, a large land which is so big that we don't refer to it as a cow's foot. Okay, so it has a positive existence. It can be a large land or a palace or whatever. So agoshpada is not goshpada bhavaha. It is not the absence of the cow's foot. Na goshpada matram. Also it is not nothing but the cow's foot. Okay. Kintu desha eva. But it is land. It is space. It is desha eva. Tabhyam anyad vastvantaram. So with those words, with the word amitra, we are referring to a different vastu, which is an enemy. Right? With agoshpada, we are referring to a different vastu, which is land. Similarly, by avidya, it is not a lack of vidya. It is not a lack of wisdom or lack of discrimination. It is not avidya in the terms of vidya matram, only vidya and nothing else. Okay? But avidya has its own existence, which has a separate existence. Okay? That is what is being said. Evam, similarly, avidya na pramanam na pramana bhavaha. So avidya is neither only vidya or only true knowledge or only pramanam, or absent, neither is it absence of pramana, na pramana bhavaha, kintu vidya viparitam, contrary to vidya. Viparitam means contrary. Vidya viparitam, contrary to vidya. Jnanantaram, it is a different jnanam, okay, having its own existence. Vidya viparitam jnanantaram avidyeti. So this avidya is something that really exists. It is not just a word to refer to absence of vidya, or it is not a word to have that profuse vidya alone and nothing else, but avidya here is to be understood as contrary to vidya, something that has its own existence. So going back to the Ishavasya Upanishad quote, it says, Vidyam cha avidyam cha yasyad vedo bhayagam saha avidyaya mrutyum tirtva vidyaya mrutam ashnute. So there is vidya and avidya. One who knows both. By vidya, he crosses over this mortal world. And through avidya, by avidya, he crosses over, through avidya meaning through the understanding of avidya, he crosses over this mortal world. And then through vidya, he gains immortality. Avidyaya mrutyum tirtva vidyaya mrutam ashnute. Okay, and there's another reference from the Garuda Puranam, which, because it sort of covers the same topic in a very terse way, I thought I'll say it here. Anatmani atma vijnanam asatah sattvarupata sukhabhave tatha saukhyam maya vidya vinashini. Okay, so it's a very nice sort of a couplet. It says anatmani atma vijnanam. Okay, in non-self, having vijnana as self. Asatah satsvarupata, in something that is not real, seeing it as real. Sukha bhave tatha saukhyam, where there is no sukha, seeing saukhyam, we're seeing sukha there or pleasure there. Maya vidya vinashini. This is maya, which vidya vinashini, something that destroys vidya. Okay, so in a very short way, it describes what it is. So essentially, one we see is a lot of texts are referring to the same thing, but in different ways. The way Patanjali and Vyasa are explaining it, the purpose is to give sort of a deeper technical understanding. Otherwise, there is a lot of things where you'll say you should not have desire, desire causes problems, and so on. that understanding is useful, but it is usually seen as advice and taken at a surface level. Whereas here, it is being explained as the whole nature of reality, something very fundamental to be understood. And then all the advice naturally follows and doesn't have to be evaluated or questioned. Because now once this understanding is established, the rest sort of follows naturally, and it is very easy to accept and inculcate. And that is the purpose of going sort of in a technical manner to explain what avidya is.
So to explain avidya, he uses the analogy of mitra, amitra. You know, who is your friend? There are certain characteristics, attributes, because of which you refer to someone as your friend. Then where do you have reference to something called non-friend and unfriend, unfriendly? So suppose somebody is unknown to you. Somebody is unknown to you. You don't say he is non-friend. Non-friend means who is opposite of friend. That means an alien, enemy. So somebody is unfriendly to you, that means what? Antagonizing you. Not only it's not your ally, but your alien. Somebody is unfriendly, somebody is non-friendly, that means what? He is like an enemy to you. So that's why he has brought the word mitra, amitra. Amitra means it doesn't mean that somebody is not friend to you because of you don't have acquaintance, you do not really know the person. So for an unknown person, you will never say, no, he is not my friend. No. Because he is unknown to you. So when we say somebody is non-friendly or unfriendly, we refer to enmity in the person for us. He has enmity for us. And therefore we say somebody is unfriendly, somebody is non-friendly. Not being friend doesn't mean is non-friend. Non-friend is one who is unfriendly to you. And that means who is having enmity for you. Similarly, avidya is such a term here. So it is not just absence of knowledge. It has its own presence. Like enemy has a presence. Absence of friend is not enemy. Enemy is an entity by itself. If somebody is not your friend, it means it is your enemy. Similarly, avidya, avidya, the prefix in the form of in a negative prefix, it is opposite. It is antagonizing. That is the meaning to be taken here for avidya. But avidya is also, because of avidya, we are able to have our business of life. Because we falsely understand ourselves, we are able to have business of activity in the world. We are somebody's father, somebody's son, somebody's brother, somebody's teacher, somebody's student, and therefore we are able to carry out our business of life. If that wrong notion had not been there at all, then there would have been no life for us. So avidya is all that knowledge which is not essential knowledge. It is because of avidya we are able to at least experience something as pleasure, even if it is not pleasure, because it really doesn't matter whether something is essentially pleasure or not, we must have pleasure. Is that right? We must experience pleasure, whether the thing is actual pleasure, essentially pleasure or not, immaterial. We must experience pleasure in life, otherwise life is meaningless. So avidya is all entire realm of knowledge which is not essential knowledge. But that knowledge gives us business of life, activity, some purpose in life. So if we did not know me at all, suppose all of us did not know our subjective entity, the me, what would we have done? We would have done nothing. We would have been like rocks, boulders, stones. Because we have misconception, I know that I am man, I am so and so, I do something. You know you are man or woman and you are so and so, you do something. But suppose we are never known, we had never any feeling of what that non-self is. And it is important to take non-self as self, otherwise our business of life is paralyzed. We have no purpose in life. If non-self is not taken as self, we have no life at all. We are as good as stones and rocks and boulders. We would be doing nothing. So this misconception, taking the non-self as self, only gives us business of life. Otherwise, life is meaningless for us. It is avidya by which we are sustained. Now, in spiritual pursuit, we must know it that this is not really me, and go towards more essential me gradually. Now, even if we are having all knowledge pursuit, it is with the help of opposite of knowledge we are trying to understand the knowledge. So until we get final knowledge, it's all ignorance. It is all ajnana. So ajnana is replaced by another ajnana. That ajnana is replaced by another ajnana. So this goes on getting replaced by ajnana until the final jnana comes. And when the final jnana comes, like it is like putting on switch and you're getting the light, darkness goes. So the step to get knowledge is ajnana. The entire ladder is of ajnana. Every step of it is ajnana. The inferior is replaced by superior. Then that becomes inferior and then it is replaced by another superior. That becomes inferior and then that is replaced by superior. So that's how we are climbing up the ladder of knowledge. And all rungs are not knowledge, but we are using them as a rung of knowledge. That's why avidya has to be understood in perspective. We are taking recourse to better avidya, which is leading towards vidya. So that is evolving. If we take recourse to avidya, which is not better vidya, that means we are devolving. We can be climbing down the steps or we can be climbing up the steps. So in order that we do not climb down the steps, we must climb up. To climb up, we have to take recourse to better avidya and discard the earlier avidya. Take better avidya, discard the earlier avidyas. So we are all climbing up on the mountain of avidya. Finally, when we reach the peak, all the steps will go away, which are all on the form of avidya. That's why the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, that verse, Ajnanam yadadonyatha Adhyatma jnana dityatvam tattva jnanartha darshanam etat jnanam. But until that time, we are all climbing up on the rungs of avidya. So inferior avidya is replaced by superior avidya, which is heading towards vidya. Because avidya can head towards other end as also. Because a ladder can take you down as well as up. So the ladder can extend downwards infinitely, can extend upwards infinitely. We must be climbing upwards rather than climbing downwards. We should not go to worse avidya from what avidya we have. That is going to demonic words. Bhagavad Gita 16th chapter, demonic and the divine endowments. But if you go on opposite side, we will be going in on the rungs of avidya only, but which will be devolving us. We go toward demonic nature. But if we climb up, we will be climbing on the rungs of all avidya, but it will be heading towards the divine endowments. So it's very intriguing, avidya. I'm sorry I am confusing you, but a confusion is removed by a better confusion. And this, we have to go on removing the confusions. Finally, the last confusion will go away, and then comes wisdom. That is unfortunately the process of knowledge. Essential knowledge. That's why ajnanam yadado anyata yataha ataha anya ajnanam. Bhagavad Gita. We go to schools and colleges. We are learning more and more avidya. But this avidya will help us to gain knowledge. This is the avidya mountain to be climbed up, rather than climbing down the avidya valley. Because if you have a mountain, you have a valley. You can't have a mountain without a valley. So going towards better is again taking recourse to avidya. But then we are evolving. One avidya will remove our other the previous avidya. So like we grow in our intelligence. Earlier intelligence is only ignorance when we have higher intelligence. When a child grows up, then it comes to know that what intelligence it had earlier was actually ignorance. Now it is going out of it. That after another revelation, it will say, what I felt was knowledge was again ignorance. This will continue. We are climbing up the mountain of ignorance, which is heading towards wisdom. There is no wisdom mountain, it's all ignorance mountain. Ignorance mountain, the peak of it will be wisdom. The valley of it will be opposite of it. So it's a very, very intriguing, fascinating concept of avidya. In order that we should not be confused, it makes it clear. This avidya is like amitra. The word avidya is flexible, it's open architecture. So therefore it makes it clear. It should be taken as amitra. Non-friend is enemy. Unfriend is an enemy. Just not friend, enemy. That's why he brings the illustrations of Amitra, Agoshpada, etc. to get to know that what avidya we should be knowing, the one which is klesha mula, the one which is taking us away from liberation or emancipation, that avidya must be identified. So it is not to be banished. We are only going to evolve on the whole rung, to climb up the ladder of avidya. Because knowledge is only one. There are not several knowledges. Truth is only one. There are not several truths. So until we reach the final truth, what was deemed to be truth will be proved to be untruthful. We have to climb up, we have to tread on the path of untruthfulness, which is leading towards the truth. Truth is one, real is one, Atma is one. There are no two reals to say that this is also real and that's also real. So it's all path of avidya. But we should know that we have proper radar, which is leading towards emancipation. If we don't have radar, the same avidya we might be climbing down and we will be entering our doom. So this avidya is klesha. Definitely klesha, amitra, like amitra, avidya. So this is overcome by superior kinds of avidya which are pointing towards vidya. That's how the path is.
So we'll stop here. Next time we start with the next sutra. Let's chant the shlokas on Guruji. वैज्ञानिक शिक्षकत्वे
वैज्ञानिक शिक्षकत्वे
कलाकार आसनेषु यः
कलाकार आसनेषु यः
योगाभ्यासे च तत्त्वज्ञः
योगाभ्यासे च तत्त्वज्ञः
तं वन्दे सुन्दरं गुरुं
तं वन्दे सुन्दरं गुरुं
योगवृक्षो लोकेऽस्मिन्
योगवृक्षो लोकेऽस्मिन्
वर्धितो यस्य प्रेरणया योगाचार्याय गुरवे
योगाचार्याय गुरवे
सुन्दराय नमो नमः
सुन्दराय नमो नमः.
Probably we could take a question or two today, if there is any. Yeah, that's a good. Huh? Acha.
If one comes to know avidya, is santosha even possible? Or is that part of avidya?
is santosha possible if one comes to know vidya or avidya?
See, again, santosha is a relative term. We have santosha when we were children. The toys, cookies, chocolates were a joy for us. So they gave us santosha. We are happy. Somebody gave us a chocolate. Somebody gave a box of cookies. We are happy. But there is a relative term. But when you come to little age, when you are a teenager, you don't have fascination for those things for which you had fascination when you were 3 or 4 or 5. When you are 25 or 28, you don't have fascination for what you had when you were teenagers. So it's a relative term. Santosha. So we should be getting santosha to our caliber whenever we are. Now in this state we must be having santushtata, we must be having contentment. Because that will only give us proper spring to our life and spring to our process. So santosha has to be sought in any case. So as the avidya will be slowly evolving to become ultimately vidya. So at every stage we will have some kind of santosha. So santosha will be there. In any case santosha is there, otherwise our life has no springs. Somebody doesn't have at all contentment, then the life loses all springs and it's all miserable. The thing is that whether we should be seeking contentment, we should not be seeking that santosha. We must be seeking wisdom. And therefore, there will be recalibration of our santosha, where we were having contentment in retrospectively. Today we don't have contentment there. That shows a evolvement in us. So there is no relationship. You need not be relating the contentment with wisdom. Wisdom is wisdom. So wisdom must be sought after, rather than contentment sought after. Then life can go haywire. If you are going after contentment, going after being happy, you want to be happy all the time, then we will mismanage our life. That should not be sought after in path of spirituality. We must seek wisdom, not seek contentment. The contentment will come. Everywhere contentment comes. If there is lot of filth, mosquitoes have contentment. Worms have contentment. So whatever is around, we can be getting contentment. There are some people, if there is lot of waste lying here and there, those who deal with waste, they are very happy to see lot of waste here and there, because they are waste merchants. They go on collecting the waste from here and there. And because they are waste merchants, the more you have waste in your house, more you try to put it out, they are happy. And they will take it away. So contentment comes in any way. So that should not be sought after. Not to relate avidya, the avidya here, the process of jnana and wisdom, with santosha. Most ignorant people are also happy. Most intelligent people are also unhappy. So it can happen. Ignorant people might be having contentment to brim. And those are very, very intelligent. They are agitated by the word and they are vexed by the word, tormented by the word. So we should be going towards reality. Our radar should be pointing towards reality. Because the contentment is lying around. If you get it, if you identify, you will get it. If you don't identify, you will not get it. Happiness is all with us, within us, around us. We don't identify. We look at the empty glass and don't look at the half part of the glass which is full. And naturally we will be sorrowing, looking at the half empty glass. But there are some people who look at the half full glass and happy.
I'll try to elaborate with reference to this framework. I think from the way you have asking the question. So basically, the question is, once avidya and vidya is known, is santosha possible, right? So now the thing is, here itself there is a sutra that says dukkham eva sarvam vivekinaha. So once there is wisdom, everything is dukkha. But that doesn't mean that the viveki is dukkhi. The yogi is not sad. He recognizes the world of, the nature of the world as made up of dukkha. Okay? But what does the yogi know once he has understood avidya and vidya? He understands that there is no such thing as bhoga. So there is no experience. We'll see that when we come to asmita, because the chitta is anyway insentient, the purusha is anyway completely pure, and so on. So there is a complete realization that this whole experience of sukha and dukkha is false anyway. The world is made up of dukkha. So once that understanding comes, he is completely insulated from any of these turmoils, whether pleasure or pain. And therefore the question of asantosha goes away, because that whole realm, that whole field of santosha, asantosha, happiness, sorrow, the whole thing gets swept away, because the bhoga itself goes away. Right? So now, like he said, going in that direction, it is not like a binary that suddenly you go there. So the santosha comes from going in that direction, so that more and more of the time is spent in the vairagya and so on. So the bhoga is getting lesser and lesser in this framework. And therefore, as one approaches vidya from avidya, the santosha is indeed possible, because the santosha comes from understanding that there is no bhoga. Right? So that is how it is to be. Okay.
And sukha dukkha are both existing entities. That's why sukha dukkha viveka. Had everything been sorrowful, there are some philosophies. And they say everything is sorrowful. So if everything is sorrowful, there is no question of any discrimination. Either way it is going to be sorrowful. If you go this way, sorrow, that way, sorrow, the other way, sorrow. So no, that's not the case. There is both sukha, dukkha, viveka. You have to discriminate between the two. That means the sukha is also an entity, dukkha is also an entity. So when you say dukkham eva sarve vivekana, why? Parinama tapa samskara dukkha. Because of parinama dukkha, samskara dukkha, and tapa dukkha and gunavrutti virodha, everything is sorrowful. But if we transcend that matter, then of course you are having the essential bliss and contentment. That's why the discrimination is there. That means both are existing. If only one entity is there, then where is the question of discrimination? If you can have darkness and luminosity both, then you will discriminate between the two. Both good and bad are there, there is a need to discriminate. If there is only good, where is the question of discrimination? Only bad, where is the discrimination? So sukha dukkha viveka, atma anatma viveka. There is something as anitya, something as nitya. Both are true. Anitya is also true, nitya is also true. But there is relativity. So sukha and dukkha, santushta, asantushtata, both are existing, will be there. That's the eternal reality. That's why we have to discriminate. We need discrimination between the two. Okay.
All right. So we'll stop here. Oh, there's one more.
Yeah.
So you explained just now about a lot about avidya, but avidya and how we can म्हणजे अविद्या असली तरच आपण विद्या त्याच्यातून शिकू शकतो. पण जसं संस्कृतमध्ये कॅन बी ऑल्सो यूज इन पॉझिटिव्ह, म्हणजे जेय आणि अजेय असं. पण जर मिथ्या ज्ञान असतं त्याचा काय डिफरन्स आहे? म्हणजे कॅन वी लर्न फ्रॉम समथिंग इज रॉंग नॉलेज, और अविद्या इज ओनली फ्रॉम अविद्या वी कॅन गो टुवर्ड्स विद्या?
See, mithya jnana is anywhere there. Even knowing the rose as rose, you think you don't have mithya jnana. Because rose is not essentially rose if you go to metaphysics of it. So there is something vyavaharika on the business plane of life, something as illusion. So if I take this marble as gold, I cannot be taking the piece of marble and say, please give me gold price. So on vyavahara plane, marble is marble, gold is gold. So there is a wonderful kind of topic which comes in Indian philosophical discussions, where they say even illusion there is sat khyati, asat khyati, sadasat khyati, sat khyati, akhyati, atma khyati. These are interpretations of illusions. Now a piece of gold and piece of marble, you say there is a distinction. But what is essentially the marble? If you go to the first plane of it, it is proton, neutron, electron according to physics. What is gold? Proton, neutron, electron. So this is this, this is this. Where is the illusion? So you are perceiving the truth even in illusion. So Ramanujacharya in his text, in his philosophical delineation, beautifully deals with it. So he says, why everything is not truth? Because of vyavahara. I cannot be doing any business of activity, or cannot take it piece of marble and go to a gold a kind of goldsmith and ask him to give me price of gold. So if everything is hypostatized, everything is going to become ash. If everything is burnt, ultimately it will become ash. Now there is no difference between ash of A matter and ash of B matter, or ash of C matter, D matter. Ash is ash. So this topic of illusion is again quite in philosophical realm. There's a great inquiry into illusion and cognition. What is your cognition is not cognition of a more wiser man. If there is a drop of blood, we will say this is drop of blood. And that's all we know, that is a drop of blood. But hematologist will tell you something about, he doesn't say it is blood, he will tell you so many things, hemoglobin or whatever the properties in the blood, he will refer to the properties of the blood. When you get a blood report, what do you get? All those things are unknown to us. We say only drop of blood. So the pathologist will refer to something else in a drop of blood, whereas we commoner will say this is drop of blood, my drop of blood, his drop of blood, anybody's drop of blood. We will not be able to distinguish. We say it is drop of blood. But one who knows hematology or pathology, he will analyze the blood and will say this is this blood, and this is his blood, and this is my blood. But suppose that his drop of blood and my drop of blood, and we walk in, we will not be able to identify which is my blood. But hematologist will be able to analyze, he will say this is his blood, he will match it with his blood, and he will say this is my blood, he will match it. So the knowledge realm goes higher and higher and higher. When you go to particle physics, then what is the blood drop? If you go to particle physics plane, what is the blood drop? There is nothing to discriminate between his blood and my blood. Like sandalwood, which costs fabulously, and another firewood which doesn't cost so much, both when burned become ash. That doesn't mean this is expensive ash for us, and that is inexpensive ash for us. But you take to medical person, Ayurvedic, he will tell you, no, this ash has a medical value for us. This ash doesn't have medical value for us. Bhasma, Ayurveda mansala, it's a different notion, because that's a different realm of knowledge. So this viparyaya, etc., seeing the rose as rose is perception, cognition for us. But Vasudevam Sarvamiti, by a higher man, he says your perception of rose is not really essential perception. It may not be invalid, but it is not essential. Rose is not rose. Much more than that. So the wisdom, rung of wisdom, when we climb up, the illusion, non-illusion, these parameters change. They are not absolute. Therefore, ultimately, the ultimate knowledge is one. From that perspective, we should know what something is. What is this world? What is this universe? From ultimate rung of knowledge only, we will know essentially what it is. Otherwise, it's all relative. Valid knowledge today will be invalid tomorrow. This has happened in science. What was valid knowledge in 17th century, 16th century, has now become invalid knowledge in 21st century. So it's all relative things. So in our frame, we will see something is cognition valid, something is invalid. Anyway, okay.
Thank you.